It took Europe over 30 years to tear down the borders that once divided the continent. Walls, even barbed wire in some cases, and suspicious glances at train stations whenever you dare to travel. The result is the Schengen area, a passport-free wonderland where 29 countries agreed to pretend that they trust each other enough not to demand papers every 5 minutes. It is a symbol of European integration, of trust, and of the post-Cold War dream. And especially for Central Europe, which was once trapped behind the Iron Curtain, remember, Schengen meant something special. It meant real freedom. No checkpoints, no questions asked. Just pack your bags, maybe take your passport and go. And the problem is that freedom seems to be cracking right now, because Germany has reimposed checks on all of its land borders. Poland, Czechia, Austria, you name it. If you're crossing to Germany by road, there's a decent chance that you will get stopped and maybe even searched. Why? Well, officially it's migration, of course, but unofficially it's a mix of domestic panic, political theater, and the rising shadow of the far right. This isn't just a German issue, don't get me wrong. What's playing out could shake the foundation of Schengen and maybe of the entire European Union as well. And guess who's standing in the blast zone? The heart of Europe. I'm Jan, this is Prague Pulse, and today we'll explore why Germany is doing all this, what it means for all of us, and whether Schengen is really dying in slow motion or rather being deliberately dismantled. And as always, before we begin, a massive thank you to everyone supporting me on herohero.co/PraguePulse and subscribing to me here on the channel. And now, let's dive in. Let's start with what Berlin says. According to the German Interior Ministry, the reintroduced checks are necessary to protect public safety, stop illegal migration, and dismantle smuggling networks. Now, don't get me wrong, there is no denying that migration has become more visible. In 2023 alone, Germany actually received over 300,000 asylum applications, which is over 50% more than the year before and also the most in the entirety of Europe. Many of those arriving in Germany are, according to Berlin at least, not entering directly. That means that they travel through other EU countries because, the continent is interconnected, of course, maybe Italy, Greece, or Hungary, before they actually make their way into Germany proper. And they do so without prior registration. Now, Berlin argues that this undermines how the EU's asylum system is supposed to work. But it does happen anyway. People cross into Germany from other countries and they don't register because the rules are maybe inconsistently applied. Maybe it happens because frontline countries, the countries where the migrants actually do enter from, are overwhelmed. Or maybe it happens because simply there is no real system for sharing responsibility across the EU. But most likely, it's just a combination of all of the above. Now, Germany's argument is quite simple on paper at least. If Brussels won't act, we will have to. And Germany actually started acting way back already in 2015 when they reintroduced random border checks with, of all countries, Austria. Now, in late 2023, this random check system got extended to Poland, Czechia, and even Switzerland. And now it actually covers all of Germany's land borders, including France, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and other countries. And the rhetoric? Well, these checks are supposed to be flexible, proportionate, and most of all, temporary. There is basically nothing to worry about, right? And the reality, well, as you can see, because they were first introduced in 2015, those border checks have been renewed over and over again. That's right. Those quote-unquote temporary border checks were introduced at the time where Donald Trump hadn't even properly started his first presidential campaign, Britain was still firmly in the EU, and Bitcoin was worth, and now let's brace for it, $400. Yes, I know. Berlin argues that the strategy actually works. They say that asylum numbers have been dropping and tens of thousands of undocumented migrants were stopped at the borders, and so the whole system is warranted. Well, it does sound effective, right? I'm not saying that the Germans are simply making those numbers up. Fewer people may be actually crossing into Germany, fine. But we need to dig deeper, of course. And when we do, questions actually start to emerge. How many of those would have been stopped anyway, even without the border checks? How many actually got returned to another EU state and so are not a German problem anymore? And most importantly, the question is, are these controls really deterring smugglers, or may be just mainly inconveniencing regular commuters who are simply trying to go to work and are legally resident in the EU. In other words, is the trade-off for those border checks really worth it? My hunch is this: smugglers aren't exactly gonna shit themselves at the sight of a uniform, They don't see a border guard and go, well, guess crime's cancelled now, we go back. No, they reroute when they see a policeman, switch cars, cross at night, or bribe someone so that the people they're trying to get across do actually cross. There's a system, and a single police officer is probably not going to deter it that much. Shut down one smuggling route, and 2 more will most likely pop up instead. This brings us to another side of the story. You see, these checks didn't simply materialize in a policy vacuum. They actually came about as a direct response to the recent surge of the far right in Germany and other places. And this surge had the mainstream politicians basically shit themselves. Now, the AfD, which is Germany's far right Alternative for Germany party, is no longer just a fringe protest movement. It's anti-immigration, anti-EU, and not exactly shy about using conspiracy theories or peddling Kremlin-friendly rhetoric. We've done videos explaining how some high-ranking AfD members have been in the service of the Kremlin, so do check those out when you're done with this video. Now, the problem for the mainstream parties in Germany is this: the AfD is getting stronger by the minute, and especially in former East Germany, the party is now even the front runner. Now, in some German states, it's even polling above 30% of the vote. It's also getting stronger in the West. Polling trends suggest that the AfD could actually soon become Germany's biggest party of them all, which, makes sense, because if there's one thing Germany has historically inhaled, it's far-right leaders ranting about protecting the German nation from foreigners. What could possibly go wrong, right? That's not just a massive red flag, it's a political alarm blaring across the country. Suddenly, migration isn't just an EU headache, it's become a fight for political survival for the traditional quote-unquote parties. And that's all the reason why I think that stricter border measures were actually introduced by the former German government of the socialist Olaf Scholz, mainly as an attempt to stop the rise of the AfD. And Friedrich Merz? Well, he saw an opening. As CDU leader, he actually slammed the Scholz government for weakness and demanded far tougher border checks, including actually turning away anyone without proper documents, no matter if they applied for asylum at the border or not. Well, in a sense, he argued for a return to pre-Schengen logic. And all of this for short-term electoral wins and to mainly try and avoid AfD dominance. In this logic, when Merz actually came to power in 2025, he didn't just inherit the controls that Olaf Scholz came with, he doubled down. More checks, stricter rules, and even more hostile language. At the campaign trail last year, he didn't even try much to hide his true intentions. Of course the police would be racially profiling at the port.
Wenn die da stehen, die wissen ziemlich genau, in welchen Autos möglicherweise illegale Migranten sind, wo möglicherweise Schlepper ihr Unwesen treiben. Das sind nicht Sie, wenn Sie aus dem Urlaub zurückkommen. Sie fahren da einfach durch. Aber diejenigen, die mit irgendwelchen komischen Autos da langfahren, mit irgendwelchen komischen Figuren drin, die werden eben auf die Seitenspur geholt und mal kontrolliert.
See, only strange-looking people would be stopped, not the very white German family returning from their holiday. So maybe try and not get too brown when sunbathing, because then you might have issues at the border when you return. Simply, the border got into the very center of the political stage in Germany. And that's the problem, because once border policy becomes a campaign issue, the incentives of the politicians shift, because they want to win, and they will use the border to win. It's no longer about what really works and what's best for the country. It's about what looks tough so that people are more incentivized to vote for those politicians who talk about the measures. What we have to remember is that in Europe, no border policy exists in isolation. The moment one country brings back controls, the pressure builds on others to do the same, whether out of fear, politics, or just pure reflex, basically. It's not always about migration only. Sometimes it's about appearances, as we've just discussed. Take Poland. With Germany turning around undocumented migrants at the border, often sending them right back into Poland, it's understandable that Warsaw wasn't exactly thrilled. So, surprise, surprise, Tusk's government quickly reinstated checks on its own borders with Germany as well. Poland didn't want to simply look like Berlin's dump for rejected asylum seekers, which the Germans were kind of doing, and Tusk maybe wanted to score some easy political points for his own benefit at home. Czechia soon piled on with its own criticism of the German border checks. Czech truckers were understandably fuming about border delays because, they have goods to deliver on time, which is becoming more problematic when they check your papers and want to see what you're actually carrying, like back in the day pre-Schengen. What's emerging is basically a patchwork of controls, reactions, and mainly political posturing. Everyone wants to look tough, no matter what it costs. In the space of just 2 years, Schengen has therefore gone from a common area to a contested one. Each country now plays by its own rules and follows its own short-sighted political interest. And the sense of unity in Schengen and the EU is going away. And the losers, well, of course, the people who used to cross these borders daily, freely, and without worry. And most of all, legally, because they're EU citizens or legal residents. See, this isn't just a diplomatic mess. It's mainly an economic and human one, because the whole region is enormously interconnected, as we've already said. Some cities, like Frankfurt-Oder in Germany and Slubice in Poland, have even formed one unit. Basically, they've been one connected city for all intents and purposes, because the border didn't play any role for a long time. But that's different now. Pictures of never-ending lines of trucks, which have been long forgotten, are back. On average, the wait time at the border has doubled, and some companies even report delays of several hours. In Poland alone, over 100,000 people commute into Germany regularly every day for work, for school, for shopping, whatever. And with border checks now back, those people face delays, frustration, and reportedly even discrimination because, the police may sometimes target those who did too much sunbathing on their holiday. And that sign on the bridge between Frankfurt and Slubice that reads "Without Borders," well, it's just become a laughingstock now. Finally, as you probably guessed, when I say that the region is interconnected, it also means that Germany itself will suffer massively. It is actually estimated that the border checks could cost the German economy around 11.5 billion euros each year. And that's not all. The increased waiting times at the border will also be reflected in increased prices for all of us, consumers. And that all will significantly increase the risk of a recession in the German economy. And I don't probably have to tell you what a recession in Germany, which is the biggest EU economy, would mean for the rest of the EU. It wouldn't exactly be good news because the EU as a whole is dependent on the well-being of the Germans. And if they suffer a recession, we all suffer with them. Here's the thing. Permanent internal border checks in Schengen are actually totally illegal. Yes, illegal. According to the rules, countries can actually only reintroduce them in emergencies. And if they do so in that emergency, they can only do so for a short period of time. The maximum is actually 6 months, after which the countries either have to stop the border checks or justify a brand new emergency to be able to renew them. So how do the countries get around this rule? Well, quite easy. They just hit the reset button every 6 months, renewing the same checks with the same reasons again and again. Even Mats, the guy who likes racially profiling people at the border, insists that the measures are actually only temporary, so everything is according to the rules, except he also uses the same justification over and over again, and he says that he doesn't want to see those border checks end anytime soon. Do you really think we're that stupid? It's like some asshole down the block insisting that he's not actually cheating on his girlfriend because, technically just the tip went in, so it doesn't count as cheating. I mean, sure, buddy, whatever helps you sleep at night. That's exactly how countries treat Schengen's 6-month rule. It's loopholed, so therefore abused and totally disrespected, while insisting that everything is actually still fine. Well, it's not. As of mid-2025, 11 Schengen countries have internal border checks in place. Some of those countries cite migration, like Germany. Others use terrorism threats or even football tournaments. Because, nothing says free movement of people like getting stopped en route to a football match. And the problem is that in the world of marketing, politics, and seemingly easy solutions that people want, nobody wants to be the first to back down and get rid of the border checks, because that makes you look weak to the voter. And so we get into a vicious circle. Migration spikes, that leads to more border checks, more applause from voters, and so might incentivize politicians to even tighten the border checks to get even more applause, and we're stuck in the circle over and over again. And with all that, Schengen's credibility is crumbling. And here's the problem. Schengen runs on trust, not force, not surveillance, just trust. And once that trust dies, it's almost impossible to resurrect. Schengen was supposed to be Europe's big party trick. Now you see the border, now you don't. It doesn't really matter. But we've managed to screw that up spectacularly. What we have now is a border striptease. Technically, it is still Schengen, but every 6 months, another layer comes off. But not in a sexy way. Instead of seamless travel, you get rotting fruit, political posturing, and some poor guy from Slubice getting interrogated because, his hoodie was a little too Balkan or whatever. And sure, an extra 5-minute delay at the border might seem harmless to you if you're just a family cruising back from vacation in your brand new Skoda and you happened to not have burned yourself too much. You're most likely going to be waved through anyway, sure. But trucks and buses, not so lucky. Often stopped, inspected, and held up for 20 minutes or much more. And multiply that by hundreds of vehicles a day, and you've got yourselves a major supply chain issue with schedules collapsing, billions slowly leaking out of the economy. Every truck stalled outside, Zittau or White House is one more nudge toward recession in Germany and in the rest of the EU as well, which is the last thing we need right now. And all this just so politicians can pretend that they're taking back control. Let's be honest, you're not. This is just posturing. And if this is the plan, Schengen isn't just collapsing, it's actually being stabbed to death in broad daylight while the EU politely sips coffee and says it's just a phase and maybe consider stopping when you see fit. The smugglers are going to find a way in anyway if they really want to. And for the countries in the heart of Europe especially, the stakes couldn't be higher. You see, Schengen once gave us all more than convenience. It gave us status, belonging, proof that we are part of the same club now, finally. And it enabled our economies, which are vitally dependent on cross-border transit, to grow faster than ever before. And now we are stuck in queues yet again, being scrutinized, wondering why we're being treated like second-class citizens in a system that we helped build and we massively relied on. Germany just says it's protecting Schengen, kind of like that guy from earlier insisting he's not cheating because, just the tip. Technically, maybe, but in reality, this guy is halfway through round 2 and asking for a towel. That's what these border checks are. A full-blown resignation on our values dressed up as precaution. Here's the problem. They're probably costing us far more than they're helping. Economically, we're bleeding billions. Recession is a real option in Germany, and politically, we're killing one of the EU's core achievements and values. If we want to preserve it, we have to face a harsh truth. Sure, with open borders, someone bad will always slip through now and then. The continent simply is interconnected and it needs to stay so. And that's simply the price of freedom. And our system needs to be able to handle that. If it's not able to handle it, the occasional criminal, maybe we don't deserve the benefits of the system at all to begin with. If every country plays the same game, we're not defending Schengen, we're kicking its corpse. The longer this goes on, the more irreversible it becomes, and the more damage it does, not just to trade and tourism, but to the very idea of a unified Europe. I'm Jan and this has been Progpulse. If you found this video useful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who still believes that Schengen is worth defending like we do. And you can also support us on herohero.co/Progpulse. Until next time, travel safe and maybe, yes, don't forget to pack your passport just to be on the safe.